Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, back with another Dark Shadows video for you guys and gals. Actually, I have two today, plus a read-along. So, this is episode 23 review, and, we've been hearing the name of Constable Carter in episode 22, and episode 21. This, my friends, is the debut of the actual character, played by actor Michael Curry, who would go on to be in Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, playing the character of Rafferty. That's one of my favorite connections. Both Dark Shadows and Halloween are my favorite franchises, and I love that they have that connection. You have Michael Curry, who's in this episode, playing Constable Carter, and he's going to go on to be in a Halloween movie. You have Mitch Ryan, who is also a Dark Shadows alum, who played Burke Devlin, the OG Burke Devlin, and he plays Dr. Terrence Wynn in Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. Those are my favorite Halloween facts of all time. I love the fact that Dark Shadows and Halloween have that sort of thing going. Now, are there Dark Shadows actors I wish would have been in Halloween? Sure, and I'll give them to you in another video someday. But there still could be some Dark Shadows actors in Halloween. I could name one in particular. I think his name is Storm. Actually, James Storm. I wasn't trying to do James Bond there at all. But this is episode 23, and it is the arrival of Constable Jonas Carter. And that's how this episode starts in a lot of ways. You have Roger, who's gonna walk up the steps, and there's a knock at the door, and the knock at the door is Constable Jonas Carter. When he answers it, there's a man in the uniform. Now, you're going to notice some things in later episodes, and I will address this now, that often there's a mix. He's referred to as the sheriff, and then he's referred to as the constable. I wonder if I do find that weird, because I never heard of somebody being both ever in my life. So I don't know if this is just a writing error, or it's just they put it in there because they needed a character to have more of a backstory, because they do give this character proper backstory in this episode, very much so. You've heard the mention of the character. In this episode, you get a bit of the character's history. You learn that Constable Jonas Carter is the one who was there 10 years ago for the vehicle homicide, the manslaughter, sorry, that Devlin hit. Roger testified that Burke hit somebody with a car, and that person ended up dying. We also learned in a previous episode that somehow that Sam Evans and Roger lied about that, but nobody knows that but Sam and Roger. You now have Constable Jonas Carter, who was mentioned in previous episodes, especially the last one, who debuts in this episode. And, he has a conversation with both Roger and Liz that I absolutely love, and it's really a great study, because you have a character when Roger says to him, "You think you could dig me up a murderer?" Roger wants Burke Devlin in prison. He wants him back behind bars, by hook or by crook. We got that in the previous episode, the way he spoke to Carolyn. Again, the previous episode is where, and again, I'm not saying he hasn't showed heel tendencies, but I feel the previous episode is so far Roger's biggest heel episode. He's been heelish, but up until the previous episode, I feel that's been more his biggest heel reveal. That, okay, we know he lied on the stand. That's dirty for sure. But we've seen some paranoia, but we haven't seen the downright vindictiveness until episode 22, in my view. I feel the vindictiveness of him and Burke, between what he feels for Burke, was more shown in the previous episode. I do feel they're doing a great job of pacing the characters. They're doing an amazing job of pacing these characters, definitely. Because we're here in episode 23. Obviously, like I said, we're getting the introduction of Constable Carter by presence. And the conversation in the drawing room is really, really great, because you have Joan Bennett who walks in and they start to have this conversation. And, he says about his ranks were tampered with. And it's Constable Carter who says, "So you want me to arrest Burke Devlin?" And, Roger says, "I didn't say Burke's name. I said nothing about Burke." Also, a bit prior to that, Constable Carter asked Roger how's his arm. And Roger said, "How'd you know about my arm?" He said, "I read it in the police report." Here's a man who does his homework. That's something you learn right away about Constable Carter. But here's your biggest learn of all time with this character. After they have this brief little inquiry about Burke, Constable Carter goes, "Did you forget I was there 10 years ago for the trial?" He goes, I can't believe Burke Devlin would be insane." And they're like, "Well, no one's accusing Burke of being insane. We don't think he's crazy." And he says, "Well, okay, 10 years ago, he said he'd come back to get you, to get this family. That was said out of anger. He spent 10 years away from here." He said, "If Burke simply waited 10 years to come back and remove a bleeder valve to try to kill you, that would be insane." And that's really what Constable Carter's telling you. That kind of premeditation is just, to him, not unheard of, but just, you're talking about somebody who is now a businessman. What Constable Carter is in a sense saying without actually saying it, who seems of sound mind and body, committing an act of pure insanity that would just be crazy to do. And sure, yeah, simple, ordinary day people do crazy things. But this would just be, to him, far-fetched. And I do think you're getting that sense that Constable Carter, though he's not trying to lean on the side, he's trying to be very objective about all of this. Unlike Roger, unlike Elizabeth, we've seen Victoria's objectiveness to this. Is Carolyn being objective? Yeah, Carolyn's being objective as long as she can get some action off of Burke. And that's true too. That's the case. But she's really flirtatious with Burke, Mr. Burke Devlin. So that's a lot of this episode, really. You have Constable Carter, who says he's going to look into this case. He phones a detective from New York to make inquiries about Burke Devlin. Also, they do mention Victoria witnessed Burke buy Roger's car, and Constable Carter wants to speak to Miss Victoria Winters. And you have this really great. A bit prior to that, Liz is trying to tell Roger, like, "Hey, I need to speak to you about. Vicky got a letter that may cause problems to you. I want to speak to you about it." And before Roger wants to go get Victoria, Liz goes, "Oh, I'll get her." And Roger's just shaking. Said, "Come on, Liz. Now's not the time." He goes, "I'll get her." She goes, "I'll get her." I said, and she walks away. And Roger's just shaking. Said, "Roger's really going to shake his head." Eventually. Also, keep in mind, I've talked about this when it comes to Time and Dark Shadows, and I'm sorry for the late mention in this video, but I want to mention it here. So, a couple episodes ago, we had the start of what would be Victoria Winters' second full day on the job. This is still that day. This is still the start of that day. Remember, Constable Carter said he would be around later that morning. This is later that morning. I guess we could say sometime after 10 o'clock, maybe almost going on 11, give or take. Um, because again, this episode, like not this episode, what I said, this sort of circumstance of the bleeder valve, it the find out of David doesn't feel as long as what I remembered it being. Again, though, too, I'm old, so I'm 41. But but also in this episode, so you get Victoria is tutor is teaching David. He's reading a book. He ends a book. He said, "Oh, that's this story is stupid. You don't even find out what happens." And she goes, "Well, maybe they lived happily ever after. Who knows?" So she had him read a book that sort of didn't really have a foregone conclusion. That's a really good book to read when you're watching Dark Shadows, because not all problems have a foregone conclusion, especially in the world of DS. That's beautiful, beautiful. So obviously, David is obsessed with Crime and Punishment. He's talking to um, Victoria Winters about oh, did you ever get in trouble when you were a kid? Yep, I got in trouble for getting a fight and bloody, and the girl says Victoria Winters can throw down. That's what you're learning in this episode. I wonder if she's more of a Mike Tyson puncher or a Muhammad Ali puncher. I wonder. It more sounds like she's the Mike Tyson type. Like, I will knock your goddamn lights out. That's what I'm hearing out of this. That's all I'm gonna say. If you disagree, please do. So she tells David, of course, if they find the person who did it, they should arrest. They should put him in jail. And she goes, well, he goes, if you ever committed murder, what if you committed murder, or wanted to murder somebody? She goes, oh, they'd lock me up and throw away the key till I was old and gray and withered away. And Vicky's just humoring him, but she also says, David, focus on your lessons here, which is true. Again, Elizabeth goes up to get Victoria. The constable wants to speak to her, and David's look is like, oh no, like I don't need the constable being here. I love this. I love how how Dan Curtis Productions and John Sedgwick shoots this next scene. You see the view, you see the staircase, the landing and the staircase, and we watch David walk across, come down. It's a shot that gets done and done again in DS at times, but it's a beautiful way they do this because the way he sneaked, it shows somebody being sneaky, especially David. David is sort of the kind of character who does sneak around, and he's really showing the formula of how the family could be spied upon too. Um, Not just by him, by anybody. Constable Carter brings up a point in this episode: is your property so well guarded that nobody can sneak onto it? And Roger goes, well, of course not. Sure, somebody could have snuck on here. Great point, right? So you see David sneak down the staircase. They show this scene, and he just cracks open the door enough that he hears Victoria giving her testimony that she's given before about what she actually saw. And the constable, okay, this prompts an investigation more so against Burke, but it's something I've brought up before. Burke more when it comes to somebody who isn't a law enforcement officer, Burke sort of almost like doesn't clear himself at times. Now here he will with Constable Jonas Carter, not in this episode, but so Constable Carter, of course, he's going to look into Burke Devlin, and really that's the biggest part of this episode. You also have a conversation between Elizabeth and David, where David Collins is telling his Aunt Elizabeth that Vicky just wants to put the blame on somebody else who didn't do it. He goes, they're not just going to put somebody in jail just because their fingerprints are on a tool. Also, once they go to the garage, Constable Jonas Carter, Roger Collins, Victoria Winters go to the garage. They get the wrench, and they bring it in. You see, it's wrapped in a white a handkerchief. I want to say it's white. Again, this is in black and white. It looks like it could be in white. It's set on the It's set on the table, and David is staring at this thing because he knows that his fingerprints are already on the wrench, but he needs a reason for new fingerprints to be on the wrench. Um, so as David goes to touch it, Victoria grabs him. David, don't touch that. Great move, but the next scene, you have David who's a little closer. Victoria's a little more farther away, and David knocks the wrench off, knocking it out of the handkerchief, and he bends down and he does grab it. Don't touch it, and he's already touched it. He goes, I'm sorry, and it was a mistake. And Rogers, you know what you did with that mistake? Oh my god. Great scenes. I really enjoy this episode. It's just fun to see a new character and also to get some backstory with that character too. It's not a lot, but it's enough to keep your interest with the brand new character. I like Michael Curry's Rafferty. If you've never seen Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, it is a must watch, my friends. True classic. All right, you make sure I didn't miss anything.